إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Everyone, thanks for coming. I'd like to welcome you to the first event of Discover Islam Week, and this is going to be a talk about the existence of God. We've got Brother Deen coming here from London. My name is Abdullah, by the way, and without further ado, let me just introduce Brother Deen. Give me 1 second. Okay, so Deen is an international public speaker and broadcaster. Adam has been working in the field of Muslim apologetics for almost a decade, speaking at over 30 university campuses across the UK. He regularly debates with prominent academics on issues ranging from religious philosophy and theology. His work draws on contemporary philosophy to defend Islam. He frequently appears on mainstream TV, including the BBC, and was former Islam Channel presenter. So without further ado, pass on to Deen.
This doesn't happen on the BBC. No. Hello, can everyone hear me? Good, very good. Okay, so in the name of God, most merciful, most kind, I'd like to begin by thanking the Islamic Society here for inviting me. I think it's my 3rd time, so it seems like you're not sick of me, so that's a good sign. I'm doing something right, hopefully anyway. Oh yes, and thanks everyone here for turning up. So, is there evidence for God? I'll be arguing this evening that in fact there is more evidence to believe in God than not to believe in God. No matter how many kind of evidences that you encounter, ultimately they can be resolved, and that the decisive weight actually falls on the side of God. So any reasonable person should, in fact, if he's exposed to all the arguments, the cogent arguments for the existence of God, the good arguments, should, in fact, believe in God. David Hume said that a wise man proportions his beliefs according to the available evidence. And this evening I'm going to put forward 4 types of evidence in favour of God's existence. And the first is that God is the best explanation for the origin of the universe. Now, if we can demonstrate that the universe has a beginning, then there is only a few answers to that point. Either something caused the universe, or the universe caused itself, which won't do, because that would mean that the universe has to exist before it exists to bring itself into existence. So that's not going to work. Or the universe does have an origin and it just popped into existence by itself. And that's not going to do either, because that would be like saying this. Suppose I'm speaking now and you hear a loud bang. And the brother asked me, Deen, what caused that bang? And I just said, nothing, it just happened by itself. No reason, it just happened. Now, he would probably think I'd need to go to the mental asylum or something, because that's a very, very silly response, unintelligible response. No one is going to accept that. So if the universe does actually have an origin, then that would mean that the universe must have a cause. Now, do we have any reasons to believe that the universe does in fact actually have a cosmic origin, does actually begin to exist? Once upon a time, people did actually believe that the universe was eternal. And then to speak of God was superfluous. It would have been a waste of time to start talking about God creating the universe, because it's eternal, there's no reason. But now, what we can say is that the mainstream view is, scientifically that is, that the universe does actually have a cosmic origin. Now I want to give 2 reasons why I think that the universe has an origin. First, there's one philosophical argument and also scientific. So, philosophically, the very idea of a universe with no origin as in no beginning, presents to us very big problems philosophically. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. Suppose we choose an arbitrary moment in time, say today. Now, for me to be here speaking to you, giving this wonderful lecture, which we're all going to enjoy, inshallah, for this to happen, there needs to be a prior moment, right? That makes sense. But if the universe has no origin, there has to be an infinite number of prior events, an infinite series of past events. So, for this to happen, there should be a moment before that. So if we go one moment before that, there will be a moment before that. If we go one moment before that, there's an infinite series of events. But the problem here is this. How does one traverse the infinite? You can't. Why? Because the very nature of an infinite, it goes on and on and on. Let me give you an analogy. Suppose I need £1 to get on a bus to go home. And I ask this brother, sorry, I keep picking on you, brother, but you're good. I ask him and I say to him, I need £1. Could you lend me £1 to get home? And he says, yes, of course, Andy, I'll give you £1, but I need to borrow the £1 as well. Okay, so I say, okay, fine. So he asks this brother over there, and he says the exactly same thing. He says, yes, I will give you the £1, but I need to ask someone as well. And he does this, and he gets the same response, and ad infinitum, this keeps going on and on and on. Will I ever get home?
No.
No. No? Yes? No? No, I will never get home. Why? Because this goes on for infinity. This can go on for infinity, assuming that there are infinite number of students at Bradford, of course. But in the same reason, for the present to actualize, the present happen, to come into play, there needs to be an infinite series of events. And the absurdity is this, brothers and sisters, my friends, that the present would never have happened. Would never have happened. And guess what? The moment before the present would never have happened, and the moment before that would never have happened, so nothing would have ever happened. Right? But the funny thing is, I am here speaking to you, talking to you, and I didn't end up coming here. So that means that the universe cannot go on forever. There must have been a point in which events occurred, in which the present actualized. I can see someone's very eager to come in.
Oh, I wouldn't have done well. I wanted to be finished now.
Oh, very kind of you. That's good. I'm glad you came in. Because everyone here believes in God. Put your hand up if you believe in God. You're in the wrong lecture. So I'm very glad this gentleman has turned up. So he'll make it fun. So what we can say is that a collection formed by successive addition cannot be an infinite, right? Because you can always add one more. For example, what's the highest number? Anyone? ISOC's going to give you £500 if you get this right. What's the highest number?
1 over 0.
Sorry? 10?
1 divided by 0.
1 divided. You can't, because every time you think of a number, you can always add one more, and so on. So a collection formed by successive addition, what I mean one after another, cannot be an actual infinite. Now, the interesting point is this, that the series of past events is none other than what? Is a series formed by successive addition. So the actual history of events cannot be an actual infinite. Second, so we have good philosophical reasons why the universe cannot go on forever. So the second point is scientifically. Do we have any scientific evidence that the universe has a cosmic origin, has a beginning? Well, yes. In 1929, Edwin Hubble discovered what is referred to as the red shift. He discovered, with the Hubble telescope, that the further away the galaxies, the redder they appeared. And the reason for that is because the galaxies were moving apart. And the light emanating from these galaxies, when the universe is expanding, it actually stretches the light, presenting what's called as the red shift. They appear redder. So that is confirmation empirically that the universe actually has a cosmic origin. Now, why does that show? Just because the universe is expanding, right? Because if we rewind the history of the universe, it will, if the universe is out here, and we rewind, it will effectively come to a point, right? So a point beyond it is no more. That is why the expansion of the universe confirms why the universe has an origin. And moreover, in 1967, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson discovered what's called the CMB, the cosmic microwave background. Now, when matter is very, very dense and compact, it gives off heat. So the argument is this: if the universe was very dense and compact at one point, because it was expanding, it should have given off a tremendous amount of heat. And what the CMB is the radioactive background of that, the initial period of the origin of the universe. So it's a radioactive relic of the initial conditions of the universe. So what we have is two empirical evidences that confirm that the universe does in fact actually have a cosmic origin. So what we can say safely is that the universe does actually have an origin. So we have two premises of the argument at hand. The first is whatever begins to exist needs a cause. The second is that the universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe must have a cause. Now, that cause cannot be a physical cause. Because by definition, the universe is all space, time, and matter. So by definition, the cause of the universe must be outside of space, time, matter. And it must be a personal cause. Why? Because it freely chose to bring the universe into existence. What other reasons do we have? The second argument, second evidence that I want to present, is that God is the best explanation for the initial conditions of the universe. When we take the initial conditions of the universe and we translate them into mathematical terms, what we find is that life, that the universe, is fine-tuned to a delicate precision in order to maintain intelligent life. Suppose you were walking through the woods. No, actually, let me change that. Suppose you booked into a hotel. And you walked into the hotel. And what you found was on the table a copy of your best author. The best book in town, right? Something that you love reading. And it's on the page, it's open on the page that you found most exhilarating. Then you look at the wall, and there's a copy of the painting that you admire by the painter that you mostly admire also. And as you're walking around, you notice that the temperature of the hotel room is set to the precise temperature that fits you. You look to the TV, and all the channels that are pre-tuned are all the channels that you like watching, set as a reminder on the programs that you like watching. And as you walk around, you can smell some food, and you go into the area, and what you find that in the minibar, you open the minibar up, and it's packed with all of the particular snacks and drinks that you like, best suited for your tastes. Caviar, sushi, fried chicken, students, baked beans, right? So at this point, would it be reasonable to say that you start thinking, that this is a conspiracy. Someone knew that I was going to turn up and book this room. That's why it's completely catered to my taste, right? You wouldn't say, well, the possibilities are vast. Maybe all of these elements just came in by themselves. No, you wouldn't say that. At that point, you would be a rational human being and conclude that someone set you up here. Maybe your partner or your mother or your father actually knew that you were in town and booked you into that room and got that room ready for you. Now, scientists have discovered that the initial conditions of the universe mirror that scenario. It's as if the universe knew we were coming. Now, the way in which we carve up our experience is to distinguish randomness, chance, accident, natural forces, material processes on one hand, and design, purpose, intelligence, intention on the other. This is how we make sense of our world, right? Now, to make that distinction between something that happens randomly by chance and something that happens by design, we identify something. What do we identify? We identify something called specified complexity. Specified complexity. And what is this? This is high probability and an independently given pattern. Independently given pattern. Now, when an intelligent being acts, like you and I, we leave behind a signature or trace of specified complexity. And by recognizing this feature, we can distinguish intelligently designed objects from those that are unintelligent outcomes. So for example, my daughter, I went into her room one day and I took all of her toys and I sort of built this building with all her toys. And when she walked in the room, she went, "Oh, what's that?" And I said, "Look, it happened by itself." She said, "Don't be silly, Daddy, you did it." Right? Because she knows for all of those things to come in that particular pattern, there must have been some kind of agency involved. It didn't happen by itself. Okay? Now, during the last 30 years, scientists have been astonished to discover that our existence rests on a knife's edge. And there are many, many examples of how the initial conditions of the universe have to be fine-tuned in order that we exist. So the prominent cosmologist Alan Guth comments, "A change by just one part in 10 to the power of 55, that's 1 followed by 55 zeros, of the rate of expansion of the universe would have led to the universe to expand too little or too much, with a consequence of rapid collapse." The British physicist P.C.W. Davies has calculated that in order to be suitable for later star formation, relevant initial conditions must be fine-tuned to a precision of 1 followed by 1,000 billion zeros at least. He also estimates the change in the strength of gravity or the weak force by 1 part in 10 to the 100th power. That's 1 followed by 100 zeros. It would prevent life from being inhabiting. These are the odds that we're speaking about. And there are many of these odds that all have to be fine-tuned in order for life to exist. So we can summarize this argument as follows. Specified complexity is a marker for intelligent design. Specified complexity is present in the initial conditions of the universe. Therefore, the fine-tuning of the initial conditions of the universe posits design. And what that says to us is there's an intelligence behind the very initial conditions of the universe. Now, some atheists, uncomfortable with this conclusion, some atheist scientists, have said, well, hold on a minute. What about our universe existing within an infinite number of universes? So if you have an infinite number of universes, then this initial condition is not going to look great. We lose the force of our argument of intelligence. So it's a bit like saying this, that if we had an infinite number of monkeys with an infinite number of typewriters, then in theory, they would produce the works of Shakespeare, right? Because you've got an infinite number of possibilities. In actual fact, there was a science institute that tried this out, and they had to stop it after 3 days, because some of the monkeys started urinating on the typewriters, and one of them actually picked it up and smashed it on another one, right? So the experiment didn't actually work in that case. But in theory, you should be able to do that, right? But the problem here is this, that to postulate other universes is mere fantasy. There is no evidence whatsoever of another universe existing. Did you know that scientists are arguing now that because of the rate of the expansion of the universe and the level of technological advancement, that we will never be able to reach the end of our universe. Right? Let alone another universe, let alone an infinite number of universes. How bizarre is that? And yet, yeah, well, there could be an infinite number of universes. The depth that people go in avoiding this conclusion. Moreover, even if there were an infinite number of universes, the mother universe that creates these infinite number of universes would also have to be designed. Would also have to be designed. Probably more so than the actual current universe that we actually reside in. So this idea of an infinite number of universes is nice, it's a good idea, right? It sounds appealing, but in actual fact it's fantasy. You might as well start talking about Hades controlling the underworld. Really, it has the same weight in evidence. So I think we have good reasons to believe that the initial conditions of the universe posits design. Thirdly, I think a very good argument for existence of God is the fact that we can apprehend a moral paradigm. Now, when I talk about morality, what I mean is something that is objective. Morality only makes sense if it's objective, right? If I can't have the moral high ground, if we do not have a position, privileged position, to say someone you're wrong or you're right, then morality has no meaning whatsoever. There needs to be a standard that we can appeal to so we can actually condemn people and praise people. Now, what I'm arguing is that that standard can only exist if God exists. If God does not exist, there is no standard. Right? So, for example, to torture a child for fun is objectively morally evil. Yes? Only one person said yes. I'm really worried now. Yeah? What are they teaching you guys in the university these days? Yes, it's objectively morally evil. Now imagine the entire world said, no, it's actually a good thing. Would that change the fact that it's actually evil? Would it change?
No.
No. Because the claim that torturing a child for fun is evil is equivalent to 1 + 1 = 2. Even if the whole world thought that it actually equates to 4, it does not change that proposition. Right? So that's what I mean by morality. Now, the problem here is this. If God does not exist, then all that exists is the natural world. And the problem here is this. Morality does not have a material property. So if I said this bottle is hard, it's plastic, it has a certain structure to it, we can test that and we can find out that this has a property of hardness. But if I said this brother is virtuous, how do I test that? Right? Could you lend me a fiver?
Only lend your pound.
Very good. You're very attentive. That's really good. How do you test mercy? If I said charity is good, how do I test the good? Where is that in the world? It's not a material property. It's not a natural property. But so what happens now is that if only the natural world exists, if only the physical world exists, and the only way that we can find out what exists is by using scientific methods, then how do we find such things as morality, good and evil? Because you cannot find morality in a test tube. It doesn't work. And we have a prominent atheist philosopher, and he's actually passed away, but he says, he's from Oxford University, he says, moral properties constitute so odd a cluster of qualities and relations that they are most unlikely not to have arisen in the ordinary course of events, without an all-powerful God to create them. What's he saying here? He's saying, look, if you have a world, a physical world, and you want to start explaining how good and evil come about, that's going to be very, very difficult. Because we can explain things like hydrogen and nitrogen, those sort of things, because we just look at the history of the cosmos, and we can explain those. Any chemistry students? Yeah? Good. So we can explain hydrogen and nitrogen by just deconstructing those structures and tracing them back to other structures, right? But when we start talking about good and evil, that doesn't work. We arbitrarily inject this in the history of the cosmos with the arrival or the evolutionary development of Homo sapiens. And what we have, so the universe is approximately 13.5 billion years old, and 2 minutes maybe. Now, up until the last 5% of the history of the cosmos, what we have is a description of what is the case. What is the case, right? Then, with the arrival of Homo sapiens, we start talking about what ought to be the case. It's good, it's evil. That's weird. Why do that? How can we start speaking about good and evil when up until that point there was no such thing as good and evil? There is only what is the case. Surely it makes sense to say this is an invention. Moreover, the animal kingdom is amoral. Animals are not moral agents. And if God doesn't exist, then what are we? We're nothing more than animals. Advanced primates, at the most. But we're still animals. So, it's bizarre that animals start talking about good and evil, right? Suppose you see a cat playing with a mouse, and it kills the mouse. You don't say, naughty cat, you torturer. You don't say that, right? You say, oh, that's not nice, but you're not a moral agent, right? You don't morally condemn them. Or if you say, for example, a snake comes and bites you, you don't say, you immoral snake. You don't say, the snake's just doing what it's doing, right? Because it's not moral. Or an eagle steals, and I remember when I used to watch these nature programs, David Attenborough, when I was a kid with my mother, and they would have these lions ripping this antelope to shreds. And my mum would go, oh, that horrible beast, horrible animal. And it stuck with me, but the lion is just doing what it's supposed to do, right? It doesn't know any right and wrong. It's not going to say, well, shall I just, give you a halal slaughter so you don't feel pain? Right. Oh yes, please do so. Yeah, that doesn't work in the animal kingdom. In the same reason, why is it that things like rape and incest are wrong in our social interactions? Because rape and incest happen all the time in the animal kingdom, right? Listen to what Massimo Pilucci, biologist, writes. He says, what we call homicide, rape, or even infanticide is very common amongst different types of animals. Lions, for example, commit infanticide on a regular basis. He says, morality is an invention of human beings. There is no such thing as objective morality. So, what becomes of when we start talking about good and evil, right and wrong, these are just conventions, these are just word games, if you like. But the problem with that is when someone does commit what we call to be immoral, let's say a rape, is he really breaking a moral law? No. He's just breaking custom, a taboo. But he's not actually doing something that is immoral. Incidentally, one could argue, if the only game in town is evolution, that rape actually would be moral. Why? Because it is advantageous. Spreading the seed. In actual fact, I don't believe that, right? And most people would not believe that, even if they're atheists. But the point is, if you want to be technical, if you want to follow the argument logically, then there's nothing actually wrong with rape. Not only there's nothing wrong with it, it's actually advantageous. Right? Have a think about that one. So, when people actually, in our society, when they're actually breaking moral laws, when they commit incest or rape, they're not being immoral, they're actually being unfashionable. So what that means is this. Suppose you invite someone around for dinner, and he starts picking his nose. Right? You're having your dinner, he starts picking his nose. Now, you wouldn't say, you immoral person, you. How dare you pick your nose? You'd say, you think he's socially inept, right? And you wouldn't invite him round again, right? But you wouldn't say he's an immoral person. In the same way, all of our morality, all of our notions of morality, what we consider to be good and evil are in the same way. They're just breaking social norms. There's nothing moral about it. But having said that, I think we all here do believe that there is a difference between showing love to a child and torturing a child. You don't think that this is just a construction, that this is just an opinion. You do actually believe that there is a genuine difference between the two. But the only way that we can rescue our notion of objective morality is that it's grounded in something that is transcendental. If it's grounded in the world, then it means utterly nothing. So I will argue that objective morality exists, then God exists. Objective morality exists, therefore God exists. So those are my reasons. I was going to give 4 reasons, but I think time's up. Yes? I can continue. Oh, okay. All right, good. I thought we're going to pray. So, let me give you the last and final argument, the 4th one. Now, I believe that the authorship of the Quran is a good argument for the existence of God, and let me explain why. The author of the Quran puts out a challenge to mankind and says, if you doubt that this is the word of God, then bring something like it. So in effect, what's been given here is a falsification test. It's saying, look, I am claiming X, and the way to show that this is false is you provide Y. And what we do here is that if we analyze the Arabic language, we find that it falls into 2 categories, prose and poetry, very much so in English, but there are subcategories in Arabic. Prose has saj'a and mursal. Mursal is straight speech. Saj'a is basically rhyme prose, much like our poetry. And then there is al-bihar. Al-bihar. This is Arabic poetry at its best. It has 16 rhythmical patterns that the Arabic structure has to fall within, very strictly, almost mathematical, if you like. Now, what we find is the Quranic discourse, the Quranic mode of expression, the literary form, does not fall within those 2 categories. Christina Nielsen, who received a PhD in Arabic Studies from the University of California, writes, although some of the lines of the Quran may be scanned according to the classical Arabic meters, these are not as characteristic of the Quranic syllabic rhythmic patterns. The famous Arabist from the University of Oxford, Hamilton Gibb, writes, a literary form, a monument, the Quran, that stands by itself, a production unique to Arabic literature. So we've got good reasons to believe that the Quran is a unique literary form. Okay, so what does this mean to us? It means this. This challenge was offered to the 7th century pre-Islamic Arabs. Those that were vehemently against the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who hated Islam, who wanted to extinguish Islam from the face of the earth. And the point of this was to challenge their haughty arrogance, to show, look, you're not special, right? To bring them down a few pegs. Now, the Arabs at that time, the most noble thing was to be a poet. Something they could be proud of was poetry. They used to buy and sell in Arabic land, in poetry. There were 2 things that they used to celebrate. The birth of a child, male child, and also the rising of a poet within their society. 2 things that they used to cherish. So the Arabs at that time were very suited to meet this challenge. It's a bit like asking the Arabs of Dubai to build skyscrapers, right? They're very good at it right now. Okay, it's the place where they build very nice skyscrapers. So they're well within their reach of meeting this challenge. But the strange thing is, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who wasn't known for his rhetorical skill, was able to present a challenge that they could not meet. The late E.H. Palmer, professor of Arabic language at Cambridge University, writes, the best of Arab writers have never succeeded in producing equal in merit to the Quran itself. The famous scholar of Arabic at Cambridge University, A.J. Arbery, also writes, the challenge was taken up during Muhammad's lifetime, and the surviving specimens of our emulation do nothing to undermine the Quran's claim to inimitability. Neither do the crude parodies put out by later writers. So what we have here is that the challenge wasn't beaten by the people that should have beaten it at that time, and it stands for 1400 years. Now, with a limited amount, a finite number of letters, a finite number of grammatical rules, it is very appealing that this challenge has not been beaten, has not been met. So what we have is good reasons to believe that one is warranted in believing that the author of the Quran in actual fact is God. So to conclude, we have an originator of the universe, that is God. We have an intelligence behind the universe, that is God. We have the paradigm of morality, the locus of all that is good and moral, which is God. And also a personal being, a God that communicates to us. As a result, we have the Quran. So I look forward to your questions. Thank you for listening.